Historical context. Understanding Circassian society. 1.4. The role of religion. Although the Circassians were traditionally animists, many converted to Islam between the 16th and 18th centuries due to interactions with the Ottoman Empire. This conversion strengthened their ties to the Ottomans and other Muslim communities, making the Circassians a symbol of resistance not only to Russian imperialism, but also to Orthodox Christian expansion into predominantly Muslim territories. Islam in Circassian society took on a unique character, blending with pre-Islamic customs and traditions. Religious leaders, imams, played an important role in uniting the tribes during the Russo-Circassian War, emphasizing the jihad against Russian forces. This spiritual dimension of the conflict added to its intensity and shaped Circassian identity during and after the war. That's 2. The Russo-Circassian War, a closer look. 3. Key turning points. The war saw several key battles and turning points that illustrate the ferocity of Circassian resistance. The Siege of All, 1822. This battle showcased the Circassian skill in defending mountain strongholds, but it also revealed their vulnerabilities when Russian forces began targeting their supply lines. The Battle of Aktchips, 1837. The Circassians' victory here became a rallying point, demonstrating their ability to defeat better-equipped Russian forces through guerrilla tactics. Shamil's leadership in Dagestan. While Shamil primarily led resistance in neighboring Dagestan, his influence extended to Circassia, inspiring unity among disparate tribes. However, the lack of centralized leadership ultimately hindered sustained coordination. 2.4. Russian military tactics. Russian commanders adopted a brutal approach to pacify Circassia, drawing from their earlier campaigns in Chechnya and Dagestan. Fortified lines. The Russians built a network of fortresses and military roads to penetrate the mountainous terrain and isolate Circassian communities. Terror tactics. Villages were burned, and captured civilians were often executed as a warning to others. Forced subjugation. Those who surrendered were forcibly resettled in lowland areas under Russian control, breaking their connection to their ancestral lands. By the 1860s, these tactics had systematically weakened Circassian resistance, setting the stage for mass deportations. 3. The genocide, the mechanics of extermination. 3.4. Mass deportations in detail. The logistics of the Circassian deportations reveal the calculated nature of the genocide. Russian authorities worked closely with local administrators and private contractors to organize the removal of Circassians from their villages to Black Sea ports. Concentration points. Circassians were forced to gather in designated areas under Russian military supervision. Here they faced starvation, disease, and abuse. Sea voyages. Overcrowded ships carried deportees across the Black Sea to Ottoman territories. Many ships lacked proper ventilation, sanitation, or food supplies, leading to high mortality rates. Arrival in Ottoman lands. Those who survived the journey often arrived in a state of extreme destitution. The Ottoman government struggled to accommodate the influx, and many refugees were resettled in remote, underdeveloped areas. 3.5. Eyewitness accounts. Eyewitness accounts from Russian officers, foreign diplomats, and Ottoman officials provide harrowing details of the genocide. A Russian officer described the deportations as a final solution to the Circassian problem, highlighting the deliberate intent behind the expulsions. British consul James Stanislaus Bell, who travelled extensively in Circassia, documented the suffering of the deportees, noting that the beaches were strewn with the corpses of those who could not survive the journey. Ottoman officials recorded the immense burden of caring for the refugees, many of whom arrived with nothing but the clothes on their backs. 4. The aftermath. Demographic and cultural impact. Life in the diaspora. For the Circassians who survived and settled in the Ottoman Empire, life was marked by hardship and resilience. Integration challenges. While the Ottomans welcomed Circassians as fellow Muslims, linguistic and cultural barriers complicated their integration. Settlement patterns. Many Circassians were resettled in border regions to act as buffers against foreign invasions. This often placed them in conflict with local populations. Preservation of culture. Despite these challenges, Circassians in the diaspora worked to preserve their language, music, and traditions. Community gatherings, such as weddings and festivals, became crucial spaces for cultural expression. 4.5. Loss of homeland. The forced expulsion of the Circassians led to the irreversible loss of their ancestral homeland, altering the demographic and cultural landscape of the Caucasus forever. Repopulation by loyal settlers. The Russian Empire repopulated Circassian lands with settlers loyal to the state, including Russians, Ukrainians, and Cossacks. This deliberate strategy ensured that the region was firmly integrated into the Russian Empire while eliminating any possibility of Circassian resistance. Erasure of presence. The demographic transformation effectively erased the Circassian presence, leaving only a few scattered communities in the North Caucasus. Entire villages were abandoned, and centuries-old cultural landmarks were destroyed or repurposed. Economic displacement. The fertile lands of Circassia, once cultivated by the indigenous population, were converted into agricultural colonies controlled by the new settlers. Loss of livelihood. The Circassians, once self-sufficient agriculturalists, were cut off from their means of sustenance, plunging them into economic hardship in exile. Severance of ties. This transformation severed the deep spiritual and cultural connection that the Circassians had with their homeland, compounding their sense of loss and displacement. Historical amnesia. The narrative of the Circassian Genocide was actively suppressed by Russian authorities who sought to rewrite history to justify their actions. Nation-building narrative. The expulsion was framed as a necessary step in the process of uniting and strengthening the Russian Empire. Silencing the victims. Official records omitted the atrocities committed, further marginalizing the Circassians and erasing their suffering from public memory. Modern perspectives on the Circassian Genocide. The Circassian Genocide continues to be a contentious issue, with ongoing efforts to achieve recognition and justice for the victims and their descendants. The 5.1. The fight for recognition. Circassian activists, scholars, and organizations have dedicated significant efforts to gaining international recognition of the genocide. Limited recognition. While a few countries, such as Georgia, have officially acknowledged the genocide, the majority of the global community remains silent, often citing political sensitivities. Russian denial. The Russian government maintains that the deportations and killings were the unfortunate consequences of war rather than a deliberate campaign of genocide. This denial has further complicated efforts to achieve recognition and accountability. Diaspora advocacy. Commemorative events. Circassian diaspora communities organize annual remembrance ceremonies on May 21st, the date marking the end of the Russo-Circassian War. Lobbying for recognition. Advocacy groups actively petition governments and international organizations to formally recognize the genocide. Their campaigns focus on educating the public about the atrocities and highlighting the ongoing consequences for the Circassian people. These efforts underscore the resilience of the Circassian community in preserving their history and fighting for justice in the face of continued denial. 5.2. Cultural revitalization. The Circassian people, despite facing centuries of displacement and cultural suppression, have made significant strides in revitalizing their heritage. These efforts, driven by both individuals and communities, demonstrate the resilience and determination of a people determined to reclaim their identity. Language preservation. The Circassian Adi language, once under threat of extinction, has become a focal point for cultural preservation. Grassroots initiatives. Community-led efforts, including language schools and online courses, emerge to teach Circassian to younger generations. Government support in the North Caucasus. In regions like Kabardino-Balkaria and the Adi language is now officially taught in schools, with increased efforts to integrate it into daily life. Digital tools. Language learning apps and social media platforms have become vital for promoting linguistic education, connecting speakers globally, and preserving dialectical diversity. Traditional arts. Circassian music, dance, and craftsmanship remain central to their cultural identity. Music and dance. The traditional Circassian dance, characterized by elegance and discipline, continues to be performed at weddings, festivals, and international events. The music, with its rich melodies and distinctive rhythms, serves as a living archive of Circassian history. Artisan crafts, Circassian sword-making, embroidery, and woodworking are being revived, with artisans passing their skills to younger generations to ensure these traditions are not lost. Festivals and gatherings. Annual festivals and gatherings provide an opportunity for Circassians to celebrate their heritage collectively. Nalmi's Festival, hosted in the North Caucasus, this event highlights traditional Circassian music, dance, and attire, reinforcing a shared cultural identity. Diaspora celebrations. Circassians in Turkey, Jordan, and other countries host cultural days and festivals to introduce their heritage to the broader community while strengthening ties within their own diaspora. Digital Renaissance. The internet has emerged as a powerful tool for Circassian cultural preservation. Social media. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook are used to share traditional songs, recipes, historical documents, and oral history. Online communities, virtual groups, and forums have allowed Circassians from different parts of the world to connect, share experiences, and organize advocacy campaigns for genocide recognition. Hash 5.3. Lessons for today. The story of the Circassian Genocide is not only a historical tragedy, but also a source of vital lessons for contemporary societies. It highlights the long-term consequences of ethnic cleansing and underscores the importance of justice, recognition, and cultural preservation. The dangers of imperialism. The Circassian Genocide illustrates the devastating consequences of unchecked imperial ambitions. The Russian Empire's pursuit of territorial expansion came at the expense of indigenous populations, demonstrating how the drive for power often results in widespread human suffering. 2. The importance of recognition. Acknowledging historical injustices is a critical step toward healing and reconciliation. The continued denial of the Circassian Genocide perpetuates the trauma experienced by survivors and their descendants, delaying efforts to achieve justice and closure. 3. The value of cultural preservation. The resilience of the Circassians in preserving their culture, language, and traditions, despite displacement and marginalization, demonstrates the strength of cultural identity. Their story serves as an inspiring example of how communities can resist assimilation and ensure their heritage endures. 6. Comparative analysis. The Circassian Genocide, while unique in many respects, shares key characteristics with other atrocities throughout history. Comparing it to other genocides provides valuable insights into the mechanisms of ethnic cleansing and the importance of addressing historical injustices. 6.1. Similarities to other genocides. The Armenian Genocide 19 to 1923. Both genocides involved systematic deportations, mass killings, and the destruction of cultural heritage. Survivors of both atrocities faced challenges in preserving their identities within diaspora communities, often struggling with assimilation while maintaining a connection to their roots. The Holocaust, 1941 to 1945. The Circassian Genocide shares similarities with the Holocaust in its systematic targeting of an ethnic group for extermination. Both genocides sought to erase a people not only physically, but also culturally, through the destruction of their homes, traditions, and historical narratives. The Rwandan Genocide, 1994. The use of terror tactics, mass violence, and propaganda in suppressing a minority population echoes the Circassian experience. Both cases highlight how ethnic divisions and imperialist ambitions can lead to devastating human rights abuses. 6.2. Unique aspects of the Circassian Genocide. Protracted nature. The Circassian Genocide stands out due to its prolonged timeline, spanning several decades rather than a single concentrated period of violence. This extended time diluted the visibility of the atrocities and allowed the Russian Empire to systematically dismantle the Circassian population without attracting significant international intervention or scrutiny. Unlike other genocides that unfolded rapidly, the Circassian Genocide's gradual execution made it harder to quantify and comprehend its full scope at the time. Geopolitical context. The Circassian Genocide was deeply rooted in the geopolitical landscape of the 19th century. Russian imperial expansion. The genocide was a direct result of the Russian Empire's imperial ambitions to secure its southern borders and gain control of the Black Sea coastline. The Ottoman factor. The Circassians' forced migration to Ottoman lands added a layer of complexity, as the empire provided refuge but lacked the resources to adequately support the displaced populations. European involvement. Despite awareness of the Circassians' plight, European powers largely ignored the genocide, focusing instead on their own interests in the Great Game and the balance of power in Eurasia. This intricate web of political and military ambitions rendered the Circassian Genocide a neglected tragedy in the annals of global history. Cultural assimilation in the diaspora. The Circassian diaspora, primarily settled in Ottoman territories, faced the dual challenge of survival and cultural preservation, safety versus identity. While the Ottoman Empire offered refuge, the Circassians were integrated into Ottoman society, often at the expense of their distinct cultural practices. Erosion of traditions. Over generations, assimilation into the host society led to the gradual loss of certain customs, languages, and traditions, particularly in urbanized areas. Diasporic efforts. Despite these challenges, Circassian communities in countries like Turkey, Jordan, and Syria have made concerted efforts to preserve their identity through cultural organizations, festivals, and advocacy initiatives. Conclusion. The Circassian Genocide remains an enduring testament to the devastating consequences of imperialism, ethnic cleansing, and the marginalization of indigenous peoples. It was not just a physical annihilation, but also an assault on the cultural, historical, and spiritual fabric of the Circassian people. The forced displacement of the Circassians and the erasure of their presence from their ancestral lands represent a profound loss, the effects of which continue to resonate more than a century later. Yet, in the face of immense adversity, the Circassian people have demonstrated remarkable resilience. Their efforts to revitalize their language, preserve their traditions, and advocate for the recognition of their history exemplify the strength of cultural identity and collective memory. By commemorating their past and fostering unity within their diaspora, the Circassians have ensured that their story endures. The Circassian Genocide also serves as a stark reminder of the importance of historical accountability. Recognizing and acknowledging such atrocities is not merely a symbolic gesture, it is a necessary step toward justice, reconciliation, and the prevention of future crimes against humanity. As the global community confronts modern challenges of displacement, ethnic violence, and cultural erasure, the lessons of the Circassian Genocide remain profoundly relevant. The Circassian people's journey, marked by survival, remembrance, and revival, underscores the enduring strength of the human spirit. Their story stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of marginalized communities and the enduring pursuit of justice, dignity, and cultural preservation.